So in the previous video, we had at last discussed about what is a necessary and sufficient condition and what are biconditional and conditional operators, how to prove them. So in this lecture, we will start with proving the last theorem which we had given in the previous video, and that is that the necessary and sufficient condition that a non-empty subset S of a group G forms a subgroup under the binary operation star are basically the first condition being A belongs to S, B also belongs to S, which implies that A star B will also belong to S. Secondly, A belong to S implies A inverse also belongs to S, where that is the basically the inverse of A in G. Okay, so let's see how can we prove this. So first of all, see that first we need to do what key, we need to show. Okay, let us understand this in a way the biconditional operator says this. So first thing we need to show is that if S is a subgroup of G under binary operation star, then one is your closure property, that is A belongs to S, B belongs to S implies A star B belongs to S, and second is A belonging to S implies A inverse belonging to S, where A inverse is the inverse of A in G. Okay, and the second case will be if A belongs to S, B belongs to S implies A star B belong to S, and A belongs to S implies A inverse belongs to S, then S is a subgroup of G under star. Okay, so we need to prove it from both directions. So first let us start with case 1. So let us start with case 1. So we know that S is a subgroup. That means ki S follows all properties of a group, right? Since S follows all properties of a group, therefore S must follow the closure property. So therefore we can directly say that if A belongs to S, B belongs to S, that implies A star B belongs to S, because S being a group also obeys the closure property. This is clear, guys, right? Now one more thing we have previously known, that if E is the identity of G, then E is the identity of S, where S is the subgroup of G under the same binary operation. Okay, so now if so then in G, A inverse star A is equals to E. This also implies that in S, A inverse star A equals to E. Now what is the reason behind that? I am just explaining it. We know that every element has a unique inverse. Okay, every element has a unique inverse. Now we know that if E is the identity in G, then E is also the identity in S. And when A belongs to G, we are also considering that A belongs to S, right? We are also considering that A belongs to S. Now if we replace A inverse with some B in S, so when B belongs to S, we have B star A equals to E, right? So basically what is this B? This B must be the inverse of A in S. This B must be the inverse of A in S. But we know that every element has a unique inverse and only one particular unique inverse, right? A unique inverse. Now, so from there we can directly conclude that this B cannot be anything else other than A inverse. Okay, because A always has a unique inverse in a particular group. So basically that directly implies that B is equals to A inverse. Okay, so A inverse is what? A inverse is basically the inverse of A in G, which is also present in S. Getting my point? So now this was the first case. Now what will be the second case? Okay, so now if A belongs to S, B belongs to S, that implies A star B belongs to S. What does this imply? Star is a binary operation. Star is a binary operation, or S obeys closure property. Right? Now see, understand the difference between the two statements. Here what we have considered since okay, I have written a wrong statement here. No, it is right. Let's see what is the difference. See, here we have considered that S is a group. S is a group. So when S is a group, if A belongs to S and B belongs to S, A star B belongs to S, and that is 100% true since S is a group. Okay, because S obeys closure property. And what we are saying here is that if this is true, that A belongs to S, B belongs to S implies A star B belongs to S, then S obeys closure property. We are not considering here S as a group. We are considering this to be true, which directly implies that S obeys closure property. Okay. And secondly, we have that since A inverse and A belongs to G such that A inverse star A equals to E, where E is the identity element. Therefore, if B belongs to S such that B star A equals to E, where E is the identity of S, that implies B is nothing but A inverse, right? Because every element has a unique identity. Now let's just see what are the properties of S we have concluded. See, first one, S obeys closure property. Okay, first one, S obeys closure property. Secondly, what happens? S is associative under star. What is the reason behind that? Let's see. See, G is a set and S is a subset of G. Okay, so whatever the elements are there in S, those elements are also there in G, and when those elements undergo associativity under the binary operation star, they will also undergo associativity under the binary operation star when they are belonging to S, right? Maybe I sound a bit confusing. Let's see. When let us check it like this. When A, B, C belongs to S, A, B, C also belongs to G, right? Now G forms a group under star. That means ki A, B, C are associative under star when they belong to G. So they must also be associative under star when they belongs to S, right? Because in which set they belong to is not a matter of fact, but what matters is that what are the properties that those numbers are showing with respect to the binary operation. Okay, so when these numbers are associative, these numbers are associative irrespective of what set they belong to. Getting my point? And since S is a subset of G, whatever property G will have, all those properties will also be obeyed by S. Okay, because S is not a unique set. S contains all those elements which belong to G, right? So therefore we can easily conclude that this is associative under star because S is a subset of G and G is a group under star. So associative. And what is the next point? S has a identity. Reason being ki G being a group under star, G has a unique identity element, and we have previously proved that when G has a unique identity element, the same identity element also belongs to the subgroup of G or the subset of G if it is forming a subgroup, right? If it is forming a subgroup, then the same identity will also be belonging to S. Okay, Are you getting my point, right? If G forms a group and has a unique identity, then its subset also has that unique identity. Its subset, or rather we can say its subgroup also has that unique identity. Similarly, the fourth point, we have that S has an inverse, which we have just proved. S has an inverse, which we have just proved, that A inverse of A inverse is the inverse of A in S, when A inverse is the inverse of A in G, right? We just proved the fact. So basically from these 4 points we can easily say that S is a subgroup of G, right? S is a subgroup of G when the given conditions are obeyed. Understood my point, guys? Okay. So next point, the next statement says that the necessary okay, this is the theorem 4. Theorem 4. The fourth theorem says that, okay, let me write it in this way so that I can shorthand it. Ki A belongs to S, B belongs to S, implies A star B inverse belongs to S. This is biconditional to S is a subgroup of G star. Okay, so how can we prove this? Let's see. Okay, say, so first we try to prove it from here to here. So from this to this. So considering this to be true, we will be proving this is a direct conclusion of this statement, and then we will go through the converse proof. Okay, so we are given what? Let's see. A belongs to S and B belongs to S implies A star B inverse belongs to S. Okay, now A belongs to G, B belongs to G. Just say A belongs to G, B belongs to G. That implies that B inverse belongs to G. That implies that A star B inverse also belongs to G by closure property. Okay. Now, when they basically belong to S, what's happened? What is happening? When they belong to S, what is happening? Okay. See here that basically what happens is that, okay, so now see, let us do that. Let us assume A star B inverse belongs to S. Okay, when A belongs to S and B belongs to S. Now when B equals to A, we can put any arbitrary element in B, right? So when B equals to A, we have A star A inverse belongs to S. That means E belongs to S. What is E? Is the identity of G. Okay. Now since E belongs to S, A inverse belongs to S. Since E belongs to S, A inverse belongs to S, right? How we can prove that? See, we can do what we did in the previous theorem, right? That B star A equals E. That implies A inverse is the inverse of A in S, because here E is considered to be an element of S and A is being considered to be an element of S, and A always has a unique inverse. Okay, so this directly implies that A inverse belongs to S. Getting my point? now so we have proved that S consists of an inverse, S has an identity, as well as and we also know that the binary operation star is associative. Okay, binary operation star is associative because G is itself a group. So we just need to show that star is closure, or star obeys closure property under the set S. So how we can show that? Let's see. If B equals to B inverse, okay, or let me not do this, this will be a general, this will not be a general statement. See, if B belongs to S, B inverse belongs to S, right? We have proved it in the previous theorem. If B belongs to S, B inverse belongs to S. Now if A star B inverse belongs to S, okay, we replace B inverse by B to get, or let us do one more thing. Here we can do one more thing. See, here we are not basically considering B inverse to be a complete operation. Okay, what we do is that if B equals to B inverse, that is B inverse is being replaced with B, so we can say that A star B inverse whole inverse belongs to S. That means A star B belongs to S. That means, now see, A belongs to S, which we have not written here, but we can consider it arbitrarily because we have done all the other statements using A belongs to S, and we have also said that B belongs to S. So when A belongs to S and B belongs to S, A star B also belongs to S. So basically this follows the closure property. That means ki star is closure under S, star is associative, S has a unique identity element under star, and S has a unique inverse of every element of itself. Therefore S is a group. Therefore S is a group, and since S is a subset of G, which we have previously considered, we don't need to prove S is a subset of B because we basically don't know what is G. Okay, so since S is a subset of G, S is a subgroup of G star. Okay, this portion is pretty clear. Got it, guys? Okay, so we have basically two more theorems left, which are very important to understand. So the theorem says that the intersection of any two subgroups of a group, the intersection of any two subgroups of a group is again a subgroup of the group. Okay, so basically what they mean, let's see. If S1 and S2 are subgroups of G star, then S1 intersecting S2 is also a subgroup of G star group. Getting? So how can we prove it? Basically, if I just give you an idea of how to prove it, basically, if we basically use the theorem 4 and the theorem 3 to prove this statement, we can do it pretty easily. So let us first see that S1 and S2 are such that S1 intersection S2 can never be null. Reason being ki S1 and S2 will at least have a single element, that is the identity. Okay, S1 and S2 will at least have a single element, that is the identity element. So they cannot be null. So now let A belongs to S1 intersecting S2 and B belong to S1 intersecting S2. Now what does these two statements mean? These two statements mean that A belong to S1. Okay, A belong to S1 and A belongs to S2. Similarly, B belongs to S1 and B belongs to S2. Okay, now, so what we have basically proved is, we have already proved. Now see, every subgroup of G will have the identity. So S1 and S2 consider the identity. That means that S1 intersecting S2 will always have an identity element in it. Okay, that is the first thing. Secondly, we find that Now see, first thing is the identity portion is proved. Okay. Now in theorem 4 we have seen that A star B inverse belongs to S when A belongs to S and B belongs to S. Okay. So if we can prove this as well as the closure property, we are done. Now since A belongs to S1 and B belongs to S1, then A star B. So A star B inverse belongs to S1. Similarly, A star B inverse belongs to S2. That means A star B inverse belongs to S1 intersecting S2. Therefore, see, when A belongs to S1 intersecting S2, B belongs to S1 intersecting S2, A star B inverse also belongs to S1 intersecting S2. Therefore, closure property is obeyed, or basically theorem 4 is obeyed. Theorem 4 is obeyed. Now what did theorem 4 say? Theorem 4 said that if the necessary and sufficient condition for S to be a subgroup of G under the binary operation star, if A belongs to S and B belongs to S, implies that A star B inverse belongs to S, and that particular thing is obeyed. So we can basically say that S1 intersecting S2 is a subgroup of G when S1 and S2 are individually subgroups of G star. Okay, so theorem 4 is proved. Similarly, the theorem 5 says that the union of two subgroups is a subgroup if and only if one is contained in the other. Okay, the union of two subgroups is a subgroup of if and only if one is contained in the other. So what does this basically mean? This means that if there are two subgroups, so basically if we have two subgroups of G, let's say S1 and S2, then we need to show that either S1 is a proper subset of S2 or S2 is a proper subset of S1, and only then S1 union S2 is also a subgroup of G star. This is what we need to show actually. Okay, so now we will be proving this. Okay, so these proofs are very important and very necessary also. They are very important, very conceptual. Okay, so this is a biconditional operator, as we can see, because we are given if and only if. So first we will be starting from one direction, then we will be proving the converse of that. So let S1 and S2 be subgroups of some G star. Okay, now let S1 be a proper subset of S2 without loss of generality. Okay, now that implies that S1 intersecting S2 is equals to S1 intersecting S2, S1 intersecting S2, right, S1 union S2, S1 union S2 is equals to S1 S1 intersecting S2 will be S2. Basically S1 intersecting S2 will be S1 and S1 union S2 will be S2. Okay, got a little bit confused. Now since S1 is a group and S2 is also a group of G star, and S1 union S2 is S2, therefore S1 union S2 is also a group of G star. So first case is proved. Now we will be proving the converse of that. Okay, so how to prove the converse of this? Let's see. So let S1 union S2 be a subgroup of G star. Okay, let S1 not a subset of S2 and S2 not a subset of S1. Let us consider these two. Okay. Now, since S1 is not a subset of S2, so A belongs to S1. Okay. Implies that A does not belong to S2. Getting my point? Similarly, if B belongs to S2, this implies that B does not belong to S1. Right? B does not belong to S1. That implies that A belongs to S1 union S2 and B belongs to S1 union S2. Right? Because A and B, they both belong to any one of those sets whose union we are finding out. Right? So this is what we get. Since S1 union S2 is a subgroup, that implies A star B also belongs to S1 union S2. That implies A star B also belongs to S1 union S2. Right? What does that mean? That means कि A star B belongs to S1 or A star B belongs to S2. Right? That means A star B belongs to S1 or A star B belongs to S2. Now S1 and S2 are also groups. S1 and S2 are also groups. So now let A star B belong to S1. Okay. Belongs to S1. Let A star B equals to C belongs to S1. Let us not write it this way. Let us write it in this way. A star B equal to C belongs to S1. That implies B equals to A inverse C also belongs to S1. B equals to A inverse C also belongs to S1. That means कि B belongs to S1. But that contradicts our assumption. That contradicts our assumption that B doesn't belong to S1. Okay. That means कि either S1 is a proper subset of S2 or S2 is a proper subset of S1. Got it? So one is contained in the other. Only then S1 union S2 will be a subgroup. Got it? So this was the last theorem we had in this portion of subgroups and alternating subgroups. Have I told you about alternating subgroups? I guess so. I don't remember if I had told you about alternating subgroups. Basically, the set of even permutation of a symmetric group Sn is S subscript n is an alternating subgroup. Basically told like that. Okay. So what is a cyclic group? What is a cyclic group? In this lecture, we will be completing cyclic groups. In the next lecture, we will be starting with homomorphisms. What is a cyclic group? It is very easy to understand. A cyclic group. If there exists some A belongs to G such that X belonging to G are of the form A to the power n, where n belongs to set of integers in multiplicative notation, in additive notation x equals to na. Okay, then G is called a cyclic group, a cyclic group generated by A. Okay, A is called the generator of the cyclic group. A is called the generator of the cyclic group. Now it is not mandatory for a cyclic group to have only one generator. It can have many. It can have more than one generator. First, let me give you an example of how a cyclic group looks like. So basically, if we have G belongs to A, then the cyclic group looks like E, that is the identity element, A square, A cube, and so on. And here A to the power minus 1, A to the power minus 2, and so on. Okay, and so on. So this is how a cyclic group looks like. Yeah, additive notation. In additive notation, it will be E. Here you have A. Here you have 2A. Here you have 3A. Here you have minus A. Here you have minus 2A. Got it? In this way. And this cyclic group which has a generator A, is written as G is equals to second bracket A or like this. Okay. A very important example of cyclic groups is this particular group. 1 minus 1 I minus I. And this is with respect to multiplication. Now, how is it a cyclic group? Let's see. If we have I, we can say I to the power 4 equals to 1, I cube equals to minus I, and I square equals to minus 1. And I to the power 1 is I. So, every element is an integral power of I in multiplicative binary operation. Okay. So, therefore, this is a cyclic group with generator I. Got it? Similarly, if we have this particular group Z plus, then we can see it as two generators, 1 and 2, because every element in the in this particular set integers, we can represent every element as either of the form n times 1 or n times minus 1, right? 2 is 2 times 1, 3 is 3 times 1, 4 is 4 times 1. Similarly, 2 is minus 1 times minus 2, minus 1 times minus 3 is 3, in that way. Got it, guys? So this is the main example of a these two are very important examples of a cyclic group. Okay, so now let us find out some theorems and some properties of cyclic group. Okay, so first theorem says that a cyclic group is abelian. How is a cyclic group always abelian in nature? This is very pretty easy to understand. Let us prove it in multiplicative notation. Say AP, AQ belongs to G. AP times AQ is equals to A times P plus Q. That is equals to A times Q plus P. That is equals to AQ times AP. Thus the group is commutative under the binary operation multiplication or the binary operations dot under multiplicative notation. Therefore, we can find that it is commutative in nature. Reason being ki addition operation is commutative. Got? One more thing. Inverse of a generator of a cyclic group is also its generator. Reason ki it is telling that if G is equals to this, that is the generator of G is A, then G also has its generator as A inverse. Got it? Reason being ki see, if X belongs to G equals to A to the power n, that implies X belongs to G can also be written as A to the power minus 1 times minus n. Reason being A is set of all integers. So we can find it directly from here. And similarly, we have one more thing which says that every subgroup of a cyclic group is cyclic. Every subgroup of a cyclic group is cyclic. So how can we prove this statement? So proving this statement is pretty easy. I am giving you just a brief explanation of how to prove this. See, if G is a cyclic group generated by A, that implies that some H which is a subset of G also has its elements of the form A to the power S, S being the set of integers. Okay, because G has all its elements of the form A to the power n, where n belongs to integers, and H having all the elements which are also there in G. Okay, or H, the elements of H, since the elements of H belongs to G itself, so we can say that all the elements of H are also of the form A to the power S, where S belongs to the set of integers. So we just need to prove that H is generated by some element A to the power S, where S is the smallest positive integer such that A to the power S belongs to H. Now how we can do this? See, this is to prove this particular thing, we can very pretty easily use the theorem or use the way we proved that if the order of A is n, then if a to the power k is equals to e, so k will be a integral multiple of the order of a, right? So we can do this like this. So basically what we can do is that we need to take sum m to be s cube plus r, and then we need to show that for a to the power m to be belonging to h, s must divide m. Okay, that is m must be of the form s cube, and from that we can say that all the AMs which belongs to H are always of the form a to the power s whole to the power q belongs to H, which directly implies that a to the power s is a generator of H. Okay, so you people can easily prove it on your own. I just gave you an idea. So let this lecture be up till this much. In the next lecture we will be starting with homomorphism and epimorphism. So meet you guys in the next lecture.